What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at the ever so popular S&P 500 ETF SPY, ticker symbol SPY, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Thursday, May 16th. Alright guys, SPY here today up $6.48 a share. That's plus 1.24% in regular trading hours. Quite the green day here for the overall market. So this morning we got CPI. That's of course the headline inflation read that we get. Here were the numbers. This came out of course 1 hour before the market opened. You can see on the chart there, that was where that pop hit. The forecast on the headline month over month was 0.4. That came in a little low at 0.3. Forecast for headline year over year was 3.4. That met at 3.4. The forecast for the core month over month was 0.3. That came in at a meet at 0.3, and the forecast for the core year over year was 3.6. That came in at a meet at 3.6. Well, that shot the market a bit higher here this morning, so let's take a look here. Let's start by doing a quick little volume profile analysis to pull out any bias that we can. We'll look at the psychological levels of the big money the institutions are watching, so we're going to need to take a look as well. Implied volatility, we'll take a look at the expected move, and we'll finish strong with the directional bias coming out of the chain. So listen, let's get started here, of course, with the volume profile here on the 5-minute chart. Listen, guys, by the way, I hope to see you in our private community every single day in there, every trading day, that is. I'm sending out my personal scalp setup alerts, my in-play stock alerts. I'm human verifying and then alerting unusual options activity, and then, of course, working with my Platinum one-on-one members. You can join that at the link in the pinned comment. So let's look here at the volume profile. We're going to start with right around 7:30 a.m. Central when that CPI hit. And you can see that we got a pop in volume to the green side, of course, and then volume faded really quickly. So I think really it's going to be more responsible if we just move on from that. Because in pre-market, it's really, really difficult, even on news a lot of times, to get sustained volume to really tell us a lot. Now, listen, being a relatively large green day, what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to chop off the end here just so we can get a better view at this portion. Being a larger green day, bulls, ideally, right, we would want to see as much bullish bias as we can get to support that move, because we're looking at these as two separate entities, the movement and the volume profile. Whereas bears, ideally, you guys would just, the movement already happened. You guys would really just want to see not much bias at all. In a perfect world, you would see bearish bias, but the stock's already up 1.25%, so I'm more likely just no bias to support the bullish movement that has already occurred. Now, if we look here, today's actually a really interesting day, because I could look at this and say, well, we got kind of a pop a little deeper into the day than we would typically expect to see volume that high. I could sit here and say, well, that's a little bit of bearish bias, and then we could move on and look at this and say, well, that's kind of an equal, very small amount of bullish bias, because both of these are very, very light in terms of any definitive bias. And then we can move forward into the day and say, okay, well, there's maybe perhaps like a 5% bearish bias there. The truth is, guys, it's really interesting. And then we have a very contextual close. By the way, this high volume bar, it's a rebalancing bar. Very little actual movement in the underlying stock with some wicks. That tells us that's a lot of buying and selling occurring on the same bar. Very normal for SPY for that bar to be a high volume rebalancing bar, so I tend to ignore it. But the volume bars ahead of that were very contextual. That's very normal to see for SPY. The truth is, guys, it was a really great green day. But if we're going to get picky about this, I would have preferred to see a lot stronger bullish bias in the volume profile, whereas really today it all kind of cancels each other out. There's really not a lot of supporting bias once we, kind of look under the hood. But listen, that's all right. That's one factor of many. So let's move on here to the psychological levels. This is starting to look pretty good here. Those self-fulfilling prophecy areas that, there's a lot of money watching, so we need to pay attention to them. A lot of decisions are likely to be made around these levels. So here on the 30-minute, you guys remember yesterday we were talking about how we had bounced off that 50 period, and we were really looking for any retest to see a bounce, if we're bulls, of course, and ideally getting that 50 period up as high as possible. Now, today was a big green day, and we got a test in early, like in pre-market, right? But then we ripped higher off the news. We can kind of call that a test in respect. I like to take pre-market and after hours with a grain of salt because volume is low. All right, but based on the news, we got a little bit of a higher volume pump, so we'll take that. But now, being such a bigger green day, we ripped this 50 period up relatively aggressively. Tomorrow, guys, here's what I'm looking for from a bullish perspective. Ideally, getting that 50 period up as high as possible, getting some feet up underneath today's move, at least some psychological quote-unquote feet back to the downside, like an area of potential support. And since I do expect this 50 period to continue higher tomorrow, then I would be looking for a retest of that 50 period to be a certain possibility, right? Or certainly a possibility. So if we do see a retest, bulls, you're going to want to see that 50 period continue to act as support and not break. We definitely don't want to see that break now after the move we just had. All right, bears. Really simple. The 50 period is likely to continue higher unless the stock were to just, or the ETF, I suppose, were to just tank off, right? The whole market. So the only goal that I have from a bearish perspective on the 30-minute is to break downside and reclaim the 50 period as resistance. It's really all I'm looking to do. And in doing so, that might set you bears up for a near-term downside test of that 200 period, that gray line. Moving on here to the 4-hour, you can see that we are a little bit away from that 4-hour here, or the 50 period here on the 4-hour. It's about a minus 1.9% move just to make a retest of that. So bulls, just looking for continuation on the ascending trend. Again, reclaiming as many whole dollar levels as possible each day is ideal. Bears, what you would really want to see is that 50 period start to flatten out and stop moving higher, because it's just another psychological area of potential support that you don't really want to see just continue to go higher and higher every day. However, in order to get that thing to flatten out, you would likely need to see a higher volume move downside. So really, bears, paying attention to the 4-hour, but not really until that 50 period comes back into play. Bulls, just wanting to see that reclaim as many whole dollar levels as possible every day. Now, let's move on to the most important chart of all. That's going to be the daily. So, looking at this here, guys, today was a really, really tremendous day for SPY. Not yesterday, remember what we talked about? We were talking about 525 / all-time highs as the bullish ideal. Getting above 525 would also imply an all-time high and reclaim another $5 increment from where we were at yesterday's close. Well, we did both of those things and nearly took 530. Here's the story tomorrow. Two things, bulls. Ideally, take 530. That is a very small ask, but it also is a new all-time high as well. If we can claim 530 as support and hang out above that, and anytime we backtest that, we bounce. That's not only a new all-time high, it's also a new $5 increment. That's really a small ask, but would be a great scenario here for the bulls to continue stair-stepping upside. Bears. Ideal, reject 530, head back down, reclaim 525 as resistance. And because really, bears, getting back down below 525, ideally back down below 520, the target is the 50-day moving average. And that requires a few different things to occur before we can really make a test of that. So I think bears just looking to reclaim, take it one step at a time, looking to reclaim each $5 increment is really the way to look at this here. Whereas bulls, kind of a easy street at this point as far as the ask that we're making, just a break and hold of 530, also a new all-time high. A good way to keep spirits of the market up and encourage your peers. Bears, your goal here is to discourage as many bulls as possible, as quickly as possible. Okay, and the way to do that is to look to stair-step down the $5 increments until you get to the 50-day moving average, that white line. Now, implied volatility. Okay, IV, guys, on SPY, the lowest it has been compared to the last 3 months. Okay. Now, if we were to go out even longer, it's still quite low, but make sure that you are comparing this to your intended trade time frame, because IV being low compared to 3 months ago, depending on what security you're looking at, that can change a lot compared to a week ago or compared to 2 years ago. In this case, for example, if you compare it to just a week ago, it's still very low, meaning if you're buying new options, you're paying very little Vega value up front, which is good. But if you're holding options, you've likely been experiencing some IV crush. You may not have noticed if you're owning calls, okay? But the IV crush, there is a little bit going on in there, meaning that there is a little Vega value getting sucked out. So understand that. But again, if you're looking to buy new contracts, you're paying very little Vega value up front, which is good. Now, let's take a look at the expected move. We have the luxury of daily expirations here on SPY. So the expected move by tomorrow's close, May 16th, compared to today's close, is plus or minus $2.45 per share. That's the expected one standard deviation volatility expectation. Okay, that's the market's pricing that in. Now, you might be thinking, well, what about directional bias? By design, there's no directional bias there. That's the volatility expectation, a very important piece of that puzzle. But what we can do is we can come down and look at volume. Decently high volume today, about 8.29 million contracts traded, 3.4 million calls, 4.9 million puts. So listen, we are seeing some bearish bias out of the overall call-put ratio here today, but if we go one step further and break this down by time frame, we only look at the 0 to 20 delta range. Those are going to be those short-term speculators, at least the highest concentration of them. 1.08 million calls, 2.74 million puts. Very heavy. It's interesting. Very heavy bearish bias out of the short-term speculators here on SPY today. But again, remember, that's only one factor of many. Okay, but the volume's high, so it's more than worth considering. I've been tracking this for years on SPY daily. Listen, if you're getting value out of these daily SPY uploads, I ask you to do one thing. Please leave a like on the video and then get out of here and enjoy your day. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.